What's the penalty for careless driving? Well, careless driving carries a potential disqualification of 2 years. It can carry a disqualification of up to 4 years if you've been convicted twice or more of careless driving in the previous 3 years. But if it's your first time coming to court for careless driving, as it is for most people, then the judge has a discretion not to disqualify you. And that discretion then is based on the arguments that your lawyer brings to court on your behalf to persuade the judge not to disqualify you if it's your first time coming to court for careless driving. Is careless driving a criminal offence? Yeah, it is a criminal offence, but it's treated slightly differently to other types of offences. First of all, it's a road traffic offence. Secondly, it's not an offence that requires intention. The prosecution don't have to prove that you intended to drive in the way that you did. They just have to prove that you knew what you were doing when you were driving. It's separated from other criminal offences because of the lack of intent required. Most offences require the state to prove that you intended to commit the act. In careless driving, intention isn't required. You can't commit theft unless you intended to steal. You can't commit deception unless you intended to deceive someone. You can't commit an assault unless you intended to assault them. But you can commit careless driving even if you didn't intend to drive carelessly. What's the difference between careless driving and dangerous driving? It's effectively a matter of degree. By that I mean it depends on the consequences of your driving. If your driving causes injury to a person or damage to property, it's very likely going to be elevated from one of careless driving to one of dangerous driving. So it depends on the consequences. That's pretty much it. Everyone is expected to drive in a manner that will be expected of a competent and careful driver. What careless driving is where your driving falls below the standard of a competent and careful driver. What dangerous driving is where your driving falls far below the standard that will be expected of a competent and careful driver. So it's really a matter of degree or the severity of what happens in the driving that determines the charge you're going to get. What does careless driving include? Well, there's no standard definition of what careless driving is. It's defined in the Act as driving without due care and attention, but they don't really define what that means. In general, what it means is that your driving falls below what would be expected of a competent and careful driver. That's a generalized description of what careless driving is. If your driving falls beneath that standard, it's generally regarded as careless driving. That might include undertaking on the left-hand side, driving inappropriately close to someone in front of you, in other words known as tailgating, things of that nature. That's generally what's regarded as careless driving, but it's taken on a case-by-case basis, but it's not defined clearly in law.